Welcome back. So, it's been a while for this series. When I started Let's Make Stuff, I had no expectations of it being this weekly or even monthly program. I wanted a separate series to highlight what, in modern terms, we would consider the makerspace and the SCA, or at least my part of it. But I didn't expect it to take quite this long to turn around another video. And today we're not going to be talking about the nitty-gritty how to make stuff like we did with the first video with sharpening tools. I want to delve into something a little more macroscopic. I want to deal with a concept that I'm hoping a lot of you can use in your next major SCA project or next major mundane project. You know, this, what we're going to talk about today applies across the board. So yeah, I made a cart. If you follow me on social media, you probably saw me post. This was a while ago, and it's been kind of a work in progress, yeah, fixing stuff, learning stuff, and so forth. But why did I make it? It was such a big project. I've been asked that question. It certainly wasn't to show off. I actually had a reason. And the reason was, frankly, mine and my wife's SCA kit. I mean, we've been playing a quarter century, so we've collected, we've amassed some nice stuff we like to take with us, even if it's just a day event. We're probably bringing our hardwood folding chairs. We're probably bringing our feast gear. We're probably bringing a small cooler or box for our personal provisions. My wife's probably bringing her scroll painting kit, which is several containers. That is her major skill set in the SCA, among many others, but she is probably most well known right now for her illumination skills, and she has a kit to go with that. If you add all that up, that's a not small amount of stuff to lug across a field. And having had to move all that just for day events, no camping, no tents involved, that was 3 or 4 or 5 trips from the car to wherever we were setting up. And it was, I'm not 20 anymore. That's a lot of walking, and it hurts, and it threw my back out a couple times. And it was a lot of stuff to haul. Did we try buying a cart? Yeah, we did. We got a yellow farm wagon from a local tractor supply store. And functionally it works-ish. It certainly fit all the stuff and carried everything, but it was so ugly. I mean, there's no amount of dressing that up or painting it or putting fabric over it covered up the fact that it was this hideous metal and rubber tired farm wagon that you just want to hide somewhere. And it was one of the things I didn't want to leave out because it detracted so much from the SCA environment around it. If I had this thing parked, you know, behind us or near us, it just ruined whatever ambiance we were trying to build up. And you certainly didn't want it in contrast with one of the group pavilions that might be up, or within eyeshot of the royal or baronial thrones. It worked, but it was so ugly, and on a par with how visually unappealing it was. There was also the fact that loading this thing in the back of our van by itself with the sides pulled off, it takes up half the cargo envelope. I mean, a day trip suddenly became this this process. You'd load all of my stuff in the car, all my wife's stuff in the car, which, volumetrically wasn't that heavy, but it was a lot of stuff. Then you put the wagon in the back, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, almost the whole back of the van is full for a day trip where we're not taking that much stuff. So modern wagons didn't work for us for a bunch of reasons, as I've said. They don't fold up. They're not collapsible. It was just, they work great for what they are designed to work for, but it didn't meet our needs. So that circumstance right there is why I built the wagon. So, as you probably can guess, making something that's going to haul a lot of weight over distance repeatably, consistently, and have it not have all the same failings of the farm cart I just talked about, that's a tall list. Now, part of the reason I undertook this project was I had an idea that could surmount all of those obstacles. But, let's be clear, there was a lot of sitting down, staring at a blank piece of paper with a pencil in my hand and not even being able to draw stuff. There was hours, probably days worth of time of sketches and balled up pieces of paper and rulers and pulling out a calculator to run math and losing track of stuff. And there were actually a few nights where I got up in the middle of the morning at like 2 or 3 with an idea, and I'm like, I need to go sketch this out. And I went out to the shop, pulled out my workbench, laid out a piece of paper, sketched for a while, realized it was useless, the idea wasn't going to work, threw it out, went back to bed. I literally did that. But I came up with criteria. And until I came up with an idea that met these criteria, I wasn't going to build anything. And the first criteria was size. The wagon, when it was fully set up, had to be able to haul both of our chairs, our feast gear, and I set up a certain number, a certain amount of space set aside for other things that I knew we would incidentally be carrying. Not that I had any specific item in mind, but I knew as long as I had about a 1x3 or 1x2 square foot footprint, I would be able to fit a cooler or an extra box or a bag or whatever. That was my criteria. I knew I'd have to fit all that. Now, there were also constraints on this. Part of, like I said, the requirements are the cart has to fit in the back of our van and not take up as much space as as the old farm cart did, and that's a tall order. So the next thing I had to do was I had to figure out what exactly was the envelope that I had to work with. I mean, what were the physical limitations of the back end of the van? And I went and I measured the narrowest opening going in the back, pretty much the bottom edge to the edge of the frame going in the tailgate. And I measured with the tailgate closed what was the distance from the inside of the tailgate to the back of the back captain's chair. That's the back cargo envelope. With the third row folded away, that was my cargo envelope. No matter what I did, no matter what I designed, I knew I could not be physically longer than that, or it wasn't going to fit in the van. If I didn't do this right, if I didn't fit within that dimension, it was all pointless because there was no other place to put it. I also knew it couldn't physically be taller when it was folded up, however it was oriented. I knew it couldn't be taller than the back cargo envelope of the van. So when I measured from the back bed up to the edge of the doorway entrance, which is actually, you can't just go in and go from the floor of the way back all the way up to the ceiling, because you notice where it comes down, on my van anyway, where it comes down, the ceiling cups down a little bit. You lose, I think, about 2 inches or 1.5 inches. And if you math that wrong, it doesn't matter how much room you have in the van. You got to get it in there, and I had to account for that. So I know this sounds like really minute details, but these are the minute details which can kill a project if you don't think about them ahead of time. So I had a maximum length, and I had a maximum height or width, and we'll get to that in a second, but I had a second dimension that could not exceed. Uh, and in terms of how wide the back cargo envelope is, I mean, I knew that number, but my hope was to not take anywhere near that much space up. Now, the other criteria I had, and this wasn't a requirement, but this was what I was aiming for, was I wanted the cart, when it was folded up, to sit on its side, not flat. And there's a reason why. This is very important. I knew this cart was going to be heavy. It needs to hold a lot of weight, and it needs to be made of wood. So I knew it was going to be well in excess of 40 pounds, and I would not have been surprised if it broke 75 or 80. So if I lay it flat, that means it's either going to take up a huge floor space or it's going to be on top of something. Now, if it takes up a huge floor space in the back of the van, I either can't put anything on top of it or I put stuff on top of it, which means I have to unload everything from on top of it to unload the cart. That's an extra step. It's a step I don't want to take. Kind of defeats the purpose of the cart. If I put the cart on top of stuff, not only do I have to now worry about pulling this heavy cart folded up out from on top of whatever's there, but I'm worried about the weight of this cart crushing whatever's underneath it. And a number of the things that my wife and I have that we pack, you cannot, they won't take that amount of weight. And I'd be worried about, even if I braced it up on something, I'd be worried about something shifting, the cart popping down and crushing one of our mugs or her scroll supplies box or some of the kits I've put together. It's like, no. All of the weight for this needs to transfer to the floor of the van, and all of that needs to not have anything on top of it. So, ergo, when this thing is folded up, it needs to be a flat box, mostly length and width, but no depth, depending on how you orient it. It needs to slide in on its side so that my goal was just have it so it slides in and can press up against one side of the van. Then I have most of the rest of the way back to load stuff up. I can put the chairs, the cooler, the boxes still have extra room. And when I did the math, and in my mind I'm sitting here going, okay, the bed is going to be this type of material and the wheels are going to be this thick and all this is going to be, and I kept adding it up. I was pretty sure I could get this whole cart to fold down flat enough that it was less than 12 inches thick, which sounds pretty lofty, but that was my goal. I wanted as thin as possible, but I knew I can get down. That's 1 foot. That's 1 foot. Van I have, I believe, is 5 feet wide, so I would still be preserving at minimum 4 feet of cargo space, hopefully more. And that, I was very happy about that prospect. So that was the size criteria. Weight, I knew, like I said, I knew this was going to be heavy. It needs to be materials that are both strong. It needs to be materials I'm familiar with. Could I have made the cart out of aluminum or steel tubing? Would that be lighter? Actually, yes, it would have been lighter because you don't need that much steel to hold a lot of weight. And a steel frame would be much lighter, but there are two problems with that. Number one, it defeats the purpose of a cart that doesn't look hideously modern. Steel tubing or steel piping is not a period construction method. I wanted wood because it would look aesthetically pleasing. I wanted something I could leave out and it wouldn't detract from the world around it. Wouldn't detract from the medieval ambiance. But also, I have huge amounts of experience working with wood. I have no experience cutting, welding, shaping, or bolting, or any sort of fastening of metal. I could absolutely learn it, but the purpose of this project was not to not have to go learn an entirely new skill set. It was to leverage what I was familiar with. So we've discussed the material has to be wood. We've discussed the weight. It has to be. I knew it was going to be heavy. That was a concession on my part. I wasn't going to try and lighten the load because I was worried about losing strength. This was going to be loaded down, so I knew it had to be strong. So I was willing to accept the fact it was going to be heavy. And I had my dimensions. Could not exceed this height, this length, this width. And also, when it was fully folded out, when it was fully set up as a cart, I asked myself, do I want this thing narrow enough to fit through an interior door? And what a lot of people don't realize is that most commercial doors are set to a minimum width. They have to be because they're part of safety codes that allow a lot of people to get out of a building in a hurry. You can look it up, NFPA 101 Life Safety Code or the International Building Code, I believe, IBC. But I knew where to look, so I looked up those dimensions and I was like, can I make the cart so that it will fit through these doors? And I decided that if I made the cart that narrow, part of it would be stability issue. It would not be stable and it might fall over. But also, if the bed was narrow, if the bed was narrower than the wheels were tall, that would make it very hard to keep everything together. And when you see the final design, you'll understand. But I didn't want to make wheels that were so tall that they were actually taller than the cart was wide. And there's a reason why tall wheels are important here. If the bed is too low, when you go to pick it up, the idea of a good healthy cart is I need to be able to hold it comfortably while standing. Well, if the wheels in the bed are too low, the whole cart is tipping. When you go to lift it up, the whole cart is tipping forward, and stuff will fall off the front, or it'll slide forward, and all of a sudden you have a front heavy cart. And I needed a bed. I needed a bed and a design that was tall enough and stable enough that things would generally stay level while I was rolling it. Now, let's talk a little bit about the design or where I got the history from. Researching medieval carts actually has an interesting tangent to it. Now, first of all, medieval wagons, carts, cars, because a cart is a small car and car is a period term in two languages, I believe. But researching them, there's a lot of genuine historical and archaeological evidence about carts and their construction. But one of the interesting resources I found is actually more modern. Forgive me for a tangent here for a minute, but this is actually fascinating. I found out that for many hundreds of years, the technology and the design of most 2- and 4-wheel carts really didn't change radically. There were certainly advances in some tools, and there were a lot of construction techniques that did improve, but at the end of the day, the fundamental principle of what a cart is, how it functioned, how it behaved while you were pulling it or while you were pushing it, all of those things didn't change for several hundred years. And the reason why that's important here, bear with me, is that in the period between 1840 and 1860, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had a massive migration in the United States from mostly coastal cities towards Utah, the modern-day state of Utah, specifically Salt Lake City. Now, I'm no Mormon historian. I don't know too much about it. But that migration is a huge part of their history. And part of that is the Mormon Church. I don't know if it's officially sanctioned by the church, but there are reenactors who put on period clothing from that time, and many of them have reconstructed wagons from that period, and they will reenact a section of that walk. It's a big thing within that community. And frankly, it's not unlike the American Civil War or the American Revolutionary War reenactors. It is a part of history that is fascinating, it is informative, and it is part of the history for that culture. So It's a big to do, and in the modern day, it has videos of it. There are news clips, there are home videos, there are pictures of these wagons. And I will openly admit that it was just fascinating actually watching people hauling these carts, pushing them around. Some of them do come apart. They have, slot and Tuscan slot joinery and so forth to hold them together. And you have all of these carts. Now, some of the stuff obviously was not period. Some of the joints were metal where it would have been wood. Some of the construction was a little bit more modern from medieval. But at the end of the day, a two-wheeled cart with two handles being pushed by someone with a full load on it, that's going to behave in almost entirely the same way as a two-wheeled single axle cart from any time period. And seeing that balance, seeing what a cart with a small wheelbase compared to one with a wide wheelbase, seeing a cart with longer handles versus shorter handles, seeing what happens when the weight is set too far forward or too far back. That was immensely informative, and it did inform a lot of how I approached the design. Now that's a bit of a rabbit trail, but also it is worth pointing out that if you are researching anything that is SCA centric, don't automatically close off any post period, any post 1600 resources, because while technology did move forward after 1600, while mankind, society, and so forth did progress and change a lot after the classic Middle Ages, there were still examples of technology in use hundreds of years later that were unchanged or very, very little changed from what we would see in the Middle Ages. So just keep that in mind. It was an interesting, eye-opening lesson for me. I mean, I never thought I would find myself digging into Mormon reenactments. I didn't even know that was a thing until I did this project. But here we are. There's some phenomenal websites out there. A lot of them are personal websites or Facebook pages where they have pictures and videos, and it's just awesome information for someone who's researching wagons. That was just a cool bit of history. All right, so now I have laid out all my criteria. I know what my maximum dimensions are, and I know what my material is going to be, and I know what I have to do. So I set out to make it. Was this a project I just got up on a Saturday morning and did it in one day? No, not even close. There was probably, I would say probably 80 hours of work spread out over multiple work nights. I'd get off work, go have dinner, and then I'd spend 2 or 3 hours in the shop working on it. And there were definitely one or two sun up to 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Saturdays. And the only reason I didn't push later is after all that time running around the shop, my back hurt. So there was a lot of man hours associated with it. The first thing I had to do is I had to select my material. And I'll tell you right now, the use of period materials was out of the question almost immediately. I knew this thing was going to be folding. I knew it was going to break down in a way that wasn't period. I knew it was going to have a lot of forces exerted on it that would not have been exerted on a period cart, because a period cart wasn't going to be folded up and stored sideways in the back of a van. So I immediately went for durability. The bed of the cart, as well as the base for the wheels and the base of the moving parts, are all plywood, and I went for 3/4 inch. I had a lot of people ask me, why didn't I use 1/2 inch plywood, because it's so much lighter, and it is lighter. When I went to pick up the 1/2 inch plywood, I actually looked at the sheet. It had enough flex in it that I wasn't 100% confident it wasn't going to begin to bend under a full load. If a heavy weight sat in the middle of the bed while it was under load, it just felt like it had enough flex. I wasn't comfortable on it. I'm like, you know what? We're going with 3/4 inch. So almost all the components are made of 3/4 inch, and a lot of the framing on it and the handles are made out of 1x4 pine pine lumber boards. I use the Select lumber, and that's not an aesthetic choice. The Select boards, which are a little bit more expensive, are all much more straight grain with no knots in them. And the reason why that's important for the work I was doing was a straight grain wood of any type is going to be stronger and much more resilient than the same dimension of the same type of wood with knots in it, because a knot represents interruption in the grain, and it's a weak spot. And I have seen lumber break, and a majority of breaks usually center around knots in wood. So that was not something I wanted to mess with. I paid the extra money, I got the extra boards, and I used them because I knew all of this stuff was going to be taking weight, and I was not going to guess as to how strong it'd have to be. I simply got stuff that I was confident would be strong enough. In terms of joinery, getting everything together, I did contemplate doing actual mitered joinery on it, and frankly that idea went out the window almost immediately into the project. I didn't have the time or the energy to do fitted, properly cut miter joints. This project is held together with glue and with nails. Now, I know immediately there are going to be people who are like, oh my God, you used glue, you should use nails, they're so much stronger. And the reality is, no, they're not. Modern glue, even historical glue in general, if you get the right wood glue is stronger than the ligdum, which is the natural occurring material in wood that holds the fibers together. So 2 pieces of wood properly glued together, and there's a process to that, are actually stronger than the natural material that holds the wood together. And the test for that is if you were to take 2 boards with the grain running up and down and glue them together side by side, and then you were to snap that joint over your knee. It will fail, but if you look at the break, it's actually one side or the other of that break, it's going to snap at the wood. The glue is not the point of failure. So a combination of the right type of joints, making sure the wood is oriented properly and fit properly, making sure it is nailed together because the nails make sure it doesn't shift while the glue is sitting or is setting up, and using the proper wood glue, and making sure the boards are also clamped while they're gluing. Wood glue, especially PVA or white glue, works best when it's under pressure. When it's being compressed, the glue seeps into the fibers of the wood and it creates a much stronger bond. So if you use it right, it's the strongest possible bond you can use, and that's what I did. The nails helped and they served their purpose, but the actual weight-bearing elements, for everything that's held together permanently, the actual weight-bearing elements on that cart are glue. Is that period in any way, shape, or form? No, not for carts. Carts were slot constructed in one form or another. But like I said, this isn't a period cart. It's designed to look period, it's designed to hint at being medieval, but I wanted something that durability above all else. Or, best case scenario after that is it breaks with my stuff on it, something breaks, or worst case scenario, it breaks near or under someone and someone gets hurt. I did not want to mess with that. There is a bunch of hardware on it, hinges and pins, and the axle itself, and they're all metal. Of course, the hinges are metal. I used door hinges, heavyweight door hinges, and the axle is a piece of 1-inch Schedule 40 steel pipe. I would have gotten Schedule 80 if I could find it. I couldn't, but Schedule 40 looks like it's holding up just fine. And the pipe, the axle is not just the pipe. The pipe fits is 2 sections of pipe that are attached to a 2x4, Douglas fir 2x4 in fact. And that whole assembly, that's actually the second one I built. We'll talk about that later, but the current design is The axle, the actual stock of the axle is fixed onto a 2x4, and that 2x4 is what sits onto the mounts on the bottom that you'll see in a minute. So there is metal, there's hinges, the hinges are held in with screws. It's all very conventional construction. I did not, when it comes to things that were moving or things that had to be held together, I did not want to reinvent the wheel. Screws and hardened metal hinges and professional level hardware was what I went with, because again, strength and durability were paramount in this. Now, something else that a lot of people wouldn't think about is the finish of it. Once it was done, it was done. It was this pale yellow plywood and pine wood color, which is fine in itself. But I actually wound up choosing a color and a finish to go on it. Now, why did I do that? The first one, the color, I chose a dark stain predominantly for the same reason we talked about with the yellow cart. I wanted something that looked nice and looked historical. And historically, carts were made out of either hard or softwoods or hardwoods or some other material that isn't going to be buttercup yellow, which is just about the color of a pine board. A darker color hints at a hardwood, and it definitely fits with the richer color aesthetic, at least in my area of the SCA. So I chose, I believe it was a mahogany colored stain, just because it looked nice. It fit the color I was looking for. Now for the actual coat on top of the color, I used a water-based a polyacrylic actually. And that, there's two purposes there. Number one, a good poly coat actually makes a surface tougher. It increases lifespan, but also this cart is meant to be outside. It's going to be outside. One of the things that I was worried about was it getting caught in a rainstorm. And I didn't want water seeping into the wood and ruining it. And I'm not going to leave it out in a heavy rain. That was never a consideration, but I didn't want it completely beginning to warp out and bend or swell up if a few drops of rain hit it, which, plain plywood and plain unfinished boards will do that. So it got a lot of heavy coating of a water-based polyacrylic that hardened glass smooth. It looks gorgeous. You'll see in a minute, and it offers both the aesthetic I need with the dark color, and it offers the protection I needed from the elements. Now, a lot of the cart, when you look at it, it's fairly self-evident. It's pieces of wood, butted together and nailed. But a lot of people ask, how did I make the wheels? Which, that's a fair question. And the wheels look a whole lot more complex than they are. In reality, I knew I was going to be taking a piece of plywood and cutting a circle out of it. I actually researched period wheels, and they are not, some attempt at that is not completely outside of my skill set, but it certainly would have been more work and a lot more money than I was comfortable sinking into a project, especially when I wasn't 100% sure I wasn't going to screw up one or two wheels at that point. So I always knew it was going to be a circle of plywood. Circle of plywood looks tacky. That looks like a circle. It doesn't look like a wheel. So how do I make it look like a wheel? Well, what I did was I added a rim to it. And you would think with a circle, the rim is something I wrapped around the outside. It's not. If you looked at the edge of the wheel, you realize you have the board, right there. And then I tacked 2x4s, sections of 2x4s into a hexagon on the outside. On the face of it, I glued them onto the face of the wheel, and then went through with a tool. I'd already cut the wheel, so I used the edge of the wheel as a guide on the router and routed off the edge of that 2x4 so that it made a perfect circle. And by the way, you may ask, how did I cut a perfect circle out of plywood? Because it's a huge circle. It's not something you can just take a jigsaw and nail every time, and you can't. Don't try and hand cut this. I used a plunge router on a circle jig, and there's a million resources online for how to do that. If you actually want to tackle making a wheel that way, look up plunge router circle jig making a large circle, and you'll see the tools needed there. And that was the foundation of how I got two wheels of the same diameter, consistent, near perfect circles with a perfect center on them. Now, something I want to talk about is the handles. What I have here, and you'll see the whole cart in a minute, I promise. What I have here is one of the handles, and you grab this in, and this here, this is the part that slots into the cart. This is the stop, so it goes in that far. This notch is what catches a pin, and this sits under the bed. So when the whole thing locks in, it bites into the pin, and this lifts up. And this will all make sense in a minute when you see the final product. But one of the things I had a problem with, the original, as you can see right here, there's a hole, and that's for the pin. That's for this actual drop pin that goes in and holds it to keep it from falling out when you're not using it. And the first set of pins I made were wood. That was a mistake. At one point we were rolling the cart, it hit a bump, and the whole cart pitched forward and just sheared the pin off in the hole, right in the middle of the cart. Didn't destroy the cart, but I did have to get new pins. So I went through and I made metal pins, and they were just a knob that slid into the hole and locked it in place. And they worked great until we're rolling it around, and the act of the cart moving around, the pins started rattling and it fell out. They weren't snug, and I knew I couldn't make them snug just because it's metal on wood, and as it rattled around, it would make the hole larger. So what I wound up doing was I made this. And you're probably wondering, oh my God, what is this? And all it is, it's an L, and there's a pin right here. And what this does is this, when the arm is in the cart, this slides in the hole. Actually, it goes this way on this one. It slides in the hole, and then if you see, it locks down. Now that it's locked down on that, this won't come out. It won't pull out. And you'll see them when I show you the finished cart. But this was a little something I cooked up. It's not period in the least. This is just me being crafty. But dropping that in there locks the pin in place. So you'll see kind of stuff like this on my cart sometime. And that's so that these don't come flying out. And also, you're going to see the cart has side rails and a front rail on it, and they have it's kind of cut out to look like a railing rather than a solid piece of plywood. Now that's for two reasons. One of those reasons was aesthetic. I didn't want it to look like it was cut out of plywood. I wanted to try and break that illusion, or break that image. So instead of a solid side cart, I wanted railings for that aesthetic look, but also weight. As you'll see here, that's a lot of material cut out. And I actually took all the cutouts that I cut out of this cart, and I weighed them in, and I think they added up to something like 10 pounds. So the final weight of the cart was 10 pounds lighter just because I did all of these cutouts, which also look awesome. But wow, just that bit, it was aesthetic, it looked great, and it made the cart lighter. And I'm here to tell you, the final product is heavy enough that 10 pounds makes a difference. All right, so big reveal. Let's show you the cart. All right. So you've seen the current iteration, the current product. Are we done? Am I done? Am I ready to just move on to my next project? Well, yes, I'm ready to move on to my next project, but no, we're not done. Not in the least. There was some huge learning curves on this. Like I said before, my original pins are made of wood. I had to remake them all with metal pins for obvious strength reasons. The axle, the original axle I made was all wood. It was a wood 2x4 with oak 1-inch dowel rods mounted to it, and the dowel rod actually held together a lot better than I thought it would. I thought the dowel rod would be the point that split if it broke. Nope. It actually split the lumber it was mounted into. Part of the reason why I shifted to the current design I have. There are still some things on there that I don't like how they work. I need to redo some things. I may redo the axle again. The wheels work fine, but one of the things that, and I knew this was going to be a problem, historical wheels had some sort of banding on them on the outside to protect the wheel, and frankly, this one doesn't, because I don't have the skills to make a metal band or even a good leather band or anything to protect it. And this cart, if it's rolling on anything other than soft grass, it gets chewed up. The wheels have rocks embedded in them. The wood is starting to splinter. I'm probably going to wind up having to remake them in a couple of years just from wear and tear. Which, that's okay. I knew that was kind of a calculated decision when I made the cart. I learned enough from the process that I'm comfortable using different materials next time. Maybe something harder, maybe get some sort of adhesive protection for the outside edge, whatever I wind up doing. But the wheels work, but they are not a final product. I'm going to need to think long and hard about how I attack it again, but the wheels are probably going to be remade. The sides, the railings, as you saw, they look great. There are definitely some things I would do differently, and I think in the future I have the option of redoing those. The wheels, the axle, the mounts for the axle, and the railings up top, they are not glued in place. They're on hinges or just slot mounts, but everything that's affixed is affixed with screws. There's not a lot of glue holding all that in. So I have the option to go in with a screwdriver and pull those parts out. And that was deliberate. I may opt to go back in and rebuild that thing someday. Especially after I've learned, 2 or 3 years of using it, and I've learned more about it, and learn more about how it works and what its stress points are. Yeah, I'm probably going to go back and tackle it. I want that design to mature some more. For no other reason than the fact I want my designs to work, and I want to like them, and I want to think that I've carried this through to its logical extent. But also, it's a challenge. I want to learn more about the woodworking and the tool work needed to get these type of joints. Even if it's modern, because it's modern construction, it's still a challenge for me. It's something I want to push myself to learn more about. So, final thoughts on this. First of all, I really like the cart. I've taken it to multiple events, and every time it goes to an event, it's a conversation starter. People want to talk about the cart. They want to talk about how it was made, what it can do, and the highlight of the day is every time I go, so you want to see it folded up? And people are like, it folds? And I go, yeah. And I undo the process you just saw, and I store it up, and it goes, I stand it up, and they're all sitting there with slack jaws going, that's so awesome. But the other thing I really like about it is just when it's at an event, when I'm rolling it out there, it rolls up and it'll sit next to our chairs, or it'll sit next to our table or a pavilion or something, and it looks like it belongs. I've just added a prop for the medieval setting that we're going for, and I'm very happy with that. I'm very satisfied with the aesthetic that it gives off. So at the end of the day, while it's not a finished product, while it's not it's not complete. There are still things that need to be improved. There are still things that I know I'm going to have to redo, and there are still things that I know don't have an indefinite lifespan. I am very happy with where it is right now, and it still serves a very functional purpose in mine and my wife's SCA career right now. Now, we've gone through this whole process and we've talked about this cart, and it's very easy to sit there and say to yourself, oh, that's cool. And I guarantee you, if 100 people watch this, 10 are probably going to find something in what I've shown them that they're going to take to their shop and use. Like maybe it's how to make a wheel or how to do a joint or something like that. And maybe one of those 10 is going to try and make a cart. I need everyone to take a step back, and you probably want to go back and watch the video again, because making that cart's not the real purpose of this video. I want you to go back and I want you to look at what I did. I didn't just go out in the shop and make a cart. I said to myself, okay, what do I want it to do? Then I said, where do I want it to fit? Then I said, what do I want it to look like? And then I said, how much is it going to cost? And then I said, what materials am I going to use? And I established criteria. To use a modern term for it, I established the design criteria for it. And then I built to that criteria. I built it so that it would fit all of the objectives I needed it to fit. It has to be able to fit in my van. It has to be small enough to not destroy my cargo envelope. I don't want to pack it at the expense of packing 15 other things. It had to be light enough for me to move around, yet sturdy. And let's be clear, it's about 65, 70 pounds, so it's not light. Matter of fact, it's at least 3 times as heavy as the yellow farm cart. So weight was a major concession on my part, but that's still doable for me. I'm capable of leveraging that out of the car and, as you saw, set it up and use it. I established a need, I established the criteria, and then I built something. Those are engineering principles. And today we call them engineering principles, but at the end of the day, that pattern of what's my problem, what are the criteria I need to solve that problem, can I build to that, build to it, and then apply it and then learn from the process. People have been doing that naturally pretty much for as long as mankind has been using single piece tools. And we have written records of that type of process, of criteria, of design, of learning, dating back to Rome and Greece. That is how mankind learns. And my point to all of this is not some macroscopic philosophical approach. My point to all of this is, what's something in your SCA existence right now that's a challenge that you want to try and tackle? It doesn't have to be a cart. It doesn't have to be something big. Do you need a chair that better than your current chair, and you feel like maybe you want to make one? Do you need a table? Will a little folding table or a little portable table help your SCA game in some way? How about a box? How about a bag? Let's get away from woodwork. How about a bag? How about a certain hat or certain piece of garb? My point is that every day in and out of the SCA we face challenges. We face things where opportunities present themselves and there are shortcomings and whatever. The modern answer is you go online and you search for something to fix your problem, which is fair. I have a lot of things that I purchased because I'm not a tailor. I'm not a shoemaker. I'm not an armor maker. You know, these are things that at various points in my SCA career, I paid other people to provide those to me. That's fine. But before you get online, ask yourself, hey, is this challenge something that I could custom make something for? If you buy something, you're buying something that someone else made to their criteria. But maybe you can make a box that will fit just right in the passenger seat of your car. No one else's box is just right. It'll fit all your stuff and it'll fit in your car. It's either you leave some stuff at home or it won't fit in your front seat. Or maybe you need a hat that has an extra wide brim so you get enough shade and you're not burning under the sun. Most people aren't going to have that, but maybe you can, maybe you or you know someone who knows how to make a hat or knows how to sew in general. Maybe I could design a hat that means I won't have to slather myself in sunscreen. That is a legitimate criteria for me. I need to avoid a lot of sun. Maybe before we go and just buy something ready-made, we stop and ask ourselves, hey, is this a design that I could make something for? That's the takeaway. I definitely would like you all to end this video with. So thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time.